Have you ever wondered why, in love and relationships, you keep repeating the same emotions, attracting the same types of people, and reliving the same familiar pain without understanding why you cannot break free? The truth is, you are not drawn to someone because they fit you. You are drawn to them because they touch a part of your unconscious you have never looked directly at. Carl Jung, the master psychologist of the 20th century, referred to this state as the projection of the unconscious, a silent mechanism that shapes how you love, how you trust, and how you react in relationships. It is not because you are weak, nor because you chose the wrong person. When you meet someone who evokes a familiar emotional pattern you once lived through, your body responds instantly. What you label as fate, intuition, or love at first sight is often just an old memory rising to the surface. You do not feel deeply because that person is extraordinary. You feel deeply because they awaken a familiar sensation you have experienced before. The times you longed to be loved, but were not met. The times you braced yourself so you would not be abandoned. The times you sacrificed yourself to be chosen. All of it collects into a reflex, and that reflex is still deciding how you love today. In this video, I will walk you through 6 layers that are remarkably easy to recognize in everyday life, so you can tell when you are loving from a wound rather than from maturity. And pay close attention to the final layer, because it is the subtlest signal, the one most people never notice, yet it reveals the clearest truth about the way you love. Level 1. Understanding why this happens to you. Have you ever wondered why you keep repeating the same type of person in your love life? Even when you change your environment, lifestyle, or the way you love, somehow, when you look back, your story still revolves around familiar emotional patterns. Some people make you anxious. Some put you in a state of trying harder than necessary. Some make you feel never enough. You know it's not healthy, yet you can't explain why. Everything still plays out in the same old script. When you ask yourself why you're drawn to people who exhaust you, the answer usually isn't found in conscious choice. Often, you believe you're choosing someone with logic. You think you like someone because they're intelligent, because they're mature, or because they have a certain charm. But beneath all those reasons is a quiet pull coming from below. Your unconscious chose first, and your conscious mind simply came up with explanations afterward. This repetition does not come from preference or coincidence. It comes from an old wound that has formed a familiar emotional pattern. This wound comes from past experiences that taught you love must be accompanied by pleasing others, or by working hard to be chosen. And because this belief has lived inside you for so long, you don't notice that it is the one choosing for you. What you think is chemistry may simply be the familiarity of an old fear. It is like 2 magnets coming close. A magnet does not choose based on preference, it pulls according to what exists inside it. The person you're drawn to often reflects what your unconscious is seeking, not what your conscious mind claims to want. You might try to move toward a calm, secure love, but the moment someone shows up with a behavior that resembles an old emotional memory, you feel a spark. Not because they are better, but because something in you recognizes them before you consciously do. You might say you like kind people, like someone who cares, like someone who builds. But when these people appear, you don't feel anything. You don't feel chemistry, even though they have every quality on your list. Instead, you feel drawn to someone more distant, less expressive, a bit cold, or unclear. This is not a preference. This is your unconscious pattern lighting up, a pattern built from past experiences that were never completed. Your choices in love rarely start from rational attraction. They begin from an emotional memory. When someone triggers your old feelings of uncertainty, longing, effort, or waiting, you feel something familiar. That familiarity feels like chemistry, but it's really a sign of an unexamined pattern. It's like a mental shortcut you've walked for so long that when the same emotional sensation appears, you automatically turn toward it, even when your logical mind knows it's not safe. You aren't choosing them because you love them. You're being pulled because a part of you wants to finish a story that never ended. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life. You will call it fate. Until you see what is running inside you, you'll mistake it for destiny. If you grew up without enough affection, you'll be drawn to someone emotionally cold. If you had to work hard to be accepted, you'll feel chemistry with someone hard to read. If you had to prove your worth to be loved, you'd be attracted to someone who makes you work for their attention. These are not preferences, they are emotional habits your unconscious has memorized. The moment you realize this can stop you in your tracks. Suddenly, you understand you never truly chose these people. Your unconscious chose first, and you simply justified it with reasons that sounded logical. I like mature men. I like confident people. I like quiet types. These statements aren't wrong, but they aren't the real reason. The real reason is that something in you recognizes something in them. That recognition feels like attraction, but it's actually familiarity. Have you ever paused to ask why the same emotional pattern shows up in every relationship? There is no need to blame yourself. What you need is clearer observation, rather than believing everything is fate. Fate is simply the name we give the unconscious when we refuse to look at it. When you observe your familiar patterns, you'll see they appear at specific moments. When you feel you must prove your worth, when you fear being left behind, when silence hurts more than it should. These moments aren't your personality. They are reactions coming from a part of you that has not been healed. Starting today, what you can do is take one small step back and watch these reactions when they arise. When you meet someone who makes you feel anxious more than peaceful, ask, is there a part of me reacting for me? When you feel drawn to someone who gives more confusion than clarity, observe whether they match an old emotional imprint. And when you notice yourself working hard to be noticed or chosen, treat that as a signal, not fate. A stronger version of you is not someone who never feels attraction again. A stronger version is someone who understands why they feel it, and from there, knows they can choose differently. You were never bad at love. You were simply guided by an unconscious mechanism. And that mechanism can change the moment you see it. When you understand this, you no longer feel unlucky in love. You see clearly what is happening inside you, and that clarity is the first step toward a calmer, more mature kind of love that matches your true worth. Now that you've named the pattern happening inside you, the next step is not to force it to change with logic, but to see it with a clear image. Like looking at your reflection in still water, where the face once blurred by ripples begins slowly to appear. In the next layer, I will show you that image, and once you see it, you will understand why you always react the same way. Level 2. An image that helps you understand quickly and remember longer. There are emotions in love that are not new at all. They return in different relationships, as if you have already lived that exact feeling long ago. Even when the story changes and the person changes, the emotional ending is so similar that you feel like you are watching a familiar movie scene again. Sometimes it is the feeling of being abandoned. Sometimes it is the feeling of not being enough. Sometimes it is the sense that you must try hard just to keep the peace. These are signs that there is a point inside you that always gets activated in the same way. When pain in love repeats itself, it is easy to think it is because you chose the wrong person, or because you do not know how to love. But the deeper reason is not in the other person. It lies in the darkness within you, the part Jung calls the shadow. This is the psychological space where the emotions, needs, and fears you once suppressed, ignored, or rejected are stored. The darkness does not disappear just because you try to look strong or mature. The shadow is not something terrifying. It is a collection of the things you once did not dare to face. Because you never truly looked at them, they find a way to appear through your relationships. The person you love becomes a mirror, reflecting the part of you that you have never acknowledged. And if you do not understand this, you will think they are the ones hurting you. But in reality, they are simply triggering emotions that have lived inside you long before they ever appeared. Think of the moment you waited for a reply. You knew you should not worry, yet your body tightened, your heart beat faster, and your mind began to spin with anxious guesses. The other person had done nothing, but the insecurity had already risen. That is not a new reaction, it is an old feeling coming back. Your shadow works exactly like that moment. It appears not because something is wrong now, but because something inside you was once left behind with no explanation. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The darkness inside you does not appear in vague or mystical ways. It shows itself through very ordinary reactions that you have known for so long. You mistake them for your personality. When you avoid speaking your true needs in a relationship. When you give in so much that you forget your own feelings. When you fear being seen clearly because you fear that if they see the real you, they will leave. These actions look like personality traits, but they are signs of the shadow. They show that you once went through experiences that taught you to believe that revealing your needs leads to loss, that expressing your real emotions will make people walk away. Many people think they are easygoing, agreeable, patient, and good at listening. But if you look closely, you will see that behind that pleasantness is the fear of rejection. When you are excessively accommodating, it is not love. You attempt to hold on to love by never causing trouble. When you stay silent, instead of expressing what you need, it is not kindness. It is fear that your needs will drive someone away. When you do not dare ask for what you deserve, you are believing you do not have the right to be loved wholly and completely. I once heard a friend say that every time the person she liked suddenly replied more briefly or stayed silent longer than usual, her whole body tightened. Her heart pinched, her stomach knotted, her hand gripped the phone harder, and her mind raced through a series of guesses. Did I say something wrong? Do they no longer like me? Even when nothing serious had happened, the fear of being left rose stronger than her logic. What made her anxious was not the message itself, it was the memory of all the times she had been met with silence and left without explanation. That is the imprint of the shadow experiences that taught her that expressing needs leads to loss, that showing her true feelings might make someone she cared about walk away. Have you ever felt something similar? The most important moment is when you realize that the pain you feel now is not coming only from the person in front of you. It comes from a deeper place within. You are not hurting because they are silent. You are hurting because that silence reminds you of a feeling you have lived through many times. You are not wounded by their words. You are wounded because their words accidentally touch an old wound that you never had the chance to heal. When you feel anger, worry, sadness, or insecurity more intensely than the situation calls for, that is a signal that old emotions are being awakened. Your body is telling you that something inside still needs to be heard. What you can do in this moment is not to immediately change a habit or force yourself to be stronger. The most important thing is simply to recognize the reaction repeating inside you and sit with it for a moment. Look at it, name it, and let your body know that you are aware of what is happening. That alone is already a huge shift. When you understand where your reaction comes from, you are no longer swept away by it. You see clearly what you are feeling, why it is appearing, and that clarity alone calms you down. This is the first shift, small, but essential. Just once. If you look directly at your true emotion, you will see that your reactions are not irrational. They come from experiences you never had the chance to fully understand. You do not react strongly because you are weak, you react strongly because you once had to endure too much in silence. You are not overly sensitive, you simply lacked the safety to express what you needed. When you realize this, you stop blaming yourself. You begin to understand that the shadow within you wants to be heard, not to hurt you. There was a girl who had been in a relationship that exhausted her more than it brought her peace. He was near one moment and distant the next, sweet for a while, then disappearing, and she constantly waited for small signs to reassure herself. One night, sitting alone in a room too quiet, she suddenly realized that the familiar feeling in her chest was not love. It was the fear of being abandoned, a fear she had carried for a very long time. Realizing this made her sit still for a long moment, as if she were seeing herself clearly for the first time. The next morning, she left that relationship calmly, not because she no longer loved him, but because she finally chose what she deserved. When you understand why emotions rise, you become calmer in situations that once felt overwhelming. You can express your feelings clearly instead of staying silent. You choose relationships that give you safety instead of relationships where you must fight to be accepted. And when you love, you do not look for someone to fill a void. You look for someone to walk beside you. The darkness within you is not something to fight. It is simply a collection of forgotten emotions that want your attention. Repeating pain is not punishment. It is a sign that something inside you still lacks explanation. When you face these emotions, you understand why you once loved the way you did, why you held on to people who were not right for you, and why you no longer want to live that way now. When you reach this version of yourself, everything inside becomes lighter because you understand yourself more. You begin to see clearly that your current reactions are connected to what you have lived through. And when you understand how your inner world operates, you also understand that the people you were once drawn to do not define your worth. They reflect the emotions you never processed. When you dare to look at that part, you realize it is simply an unfinished piece, not a flaw, and seeing this truth helps you grow stronger and more grounded. Do you recognize moments in your life that work exactly like this? Where does that feeling appear? In which relationship? And at what point in your journey? Let us continue to the next layer to see that these emotions are not difficult to recognize at all. You simply need to look at them the right way and understand what is happening inside you. Level 3, how this shows up in your life. Have you ever wondered why your emotions get triggered so easily? A message that comes a few minutes late, a distant reply, or a tiny change in someone's tone can be enough to make you feel insecure, overwhelmed, or sad for the entire day. That reaction often makes you blame yourself for being too sensitive. But those emotions do not come from today. They come from a deeper place where the child inside you is still living with memories that were never explained. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The intense reactions you have in love often stem from old childhood feelings. The feeling of being abandoned, forgotten, or not good enough to be loved fully. Even though you have grown up, these memories still live in your body, waiting for a similar situation to wake them up. When the person you love temporarily pulls away, the child inside you thinks it is being left again. When they do not show care at the right moment, the child believes it no longer matters. And when you feel the need to try hard to maintain the connection, the child thinks love must be kept through sacrifice. Imagine a child searching for the eyes of an adult they love. The child says something small, asks a simple question, or just wants a hug. But the adult is busy, tired, or distracted by something else, so they do not respond. They do not look up. They do not hear. They do not notice. The child stands there, not understanding what is happening, and feels only one truth: maybe I am not important enough to be seen. That feeling never disappears. It grows up with you and returns every time you encounter a similar situation. Every time someone suddenly goes silent. Every time you have to guess what they are thinking. Every time you worry you did something wrong. The child you used to be is living again inside you. It reacts faster and stronger than your logic. It is afraid of being left the way it once was. It is afraid of not being chosen. Again, when the other person replies late, your heart beats faster. You are not trying to react that way, but your body behaves as though something terrible is about to happen. You can sit for hours, staring at your phone, imagining scenarios. When the person you love seems distant, you panic, as if you are about to be abandoned. The intensity of the emotion far exceeds the reality of the situation. It is not about them. It is an old emotional memory being activated. You may also find yourself fearing the loss of someone who never treated you kindly. You know they are not right for you. You know they do not bring peace, yet you still feel a painful attachment. What you are clinging to is not them. You are clinging to the familiar feeling you knew long ago, the feeling of having to hold on to someone so you would not be left alone in silence. Sometimes you agree to things you do not want. You tolerate too much. You stay silent. You accept behaviors that drain you. You do this because inside you is a part that fears that if you express your real needs, the other person will no longer want you. When you deny your needs, you are repeating the survival strategy the child once learned. Fewer demands mean less rejection. But the cost of this adaptation is that you lose yourself in love. What you fear losing the most is not the person. What you fear losing is the feeling of being chosen. The child inside you has never felt important enough, meaningful enough, or valuable enough for someone to stay willingly. So in adult relationships, you cling to any small sign that makes you feel chosen, even if it is fragile. When you realize this, You understand why your emotions feel so strong. You are not anxious because of the message. You are not sad because of their tone. You are not afraid because of a small change. All of it is the reaction of the child inside you, encountering an old fear. It reacts faster than your adult mind. It wants to be told it matters. It wants to be held and reassured that it will not be left like before. In the midst of these emotions, the most important thing you can do is recognize who inside you is reacting. When you feel your chest tighten, when your body becomes restless or uneasy, place a hand on your heart and ask, is 20-something me reacting, or is 7-year-old me reacting? This question helps you step outside the emotional wave and see its true source. You are no longer being swept away by fear, you are observing it. Before you send a message in a state of anxiety, stop for a few seconds. Breathe deeply. Wait for your heartbeat to slow down. The child inside you needs a moment to feel safe. When you create that pause, you are doing something no one ever did for you. You are becoming the adult that the child inside you always needed. The stronger version of you is not the one who never gets triggered. The stronger version is the one who recognizes what is happening and lets the inner child be heard instead of silenced. When you see this child clearly, you understand that you have not been weak all these years. You have simply been carrying an old emotion that no one ever helped you understand. As you begin to notice your repeated reactions, you will see a subtle but powerful change. You are no longer swept away by fear as quickly. You pause longer before panicking. You stop sending messages in urgency, and you no longer shrink yourself just to avoid disturbing someone. You see your emotions more clearly and understand that they do not come from the person in front of you, but from something that once frightened you long ago. This makes you calmer. You realize that what you need is inner safety, not certainty from another person. You no longer try to please someone just to stay in their life. You begin to hold your value instead of placing it in someone else's hands. The child you once were is still there, but it is no longer at the steering wheel. It no longer has to run alone in the dark. You, the adult, are now stepping in, holding their hand, saying, "We are okay. We are here together." And with that, the fear is already half as heavy. When you learn to hold the child inside you, you love differently. You love fullness, clarity, and truth. That moment is not loud, but it is very real. You realize you have become bigger than your own fear. And that is the most important shift when you understand why you once reacted the way you did, and when you begin to move through life as the adult you are, not the child who was once left behind. When you reach this point, you have already walked halfway through the journey of healing. You know what hurts you. You know what triggers you. You know what is coming back to life inside you. And from that understanding, you can build a different kind of love, one that begins from maturity, not from childhood wounds. If what you just heard touched you in any way, please help us spread these insights to more people by liking and sharing the video. Every single share is a small action with deep meaning, much like how Carl Jung's teachings quietly expand human awareness over time. And do not forget, the fourth layer is waiting for you in the next part. Let us continue this exploration together and embrace these timeless lessons. Thank you again for your presence and your continued journey alongside us. Level 4. The moment you realize an important truth. You have told yourself many times, this time will be different. Even when there were clear signs that everything was repeating itself, you still held on to a small hope that maybe this person would finally understand you, change for you, or love you in the way you had been waiting for. This hope is not wrong, but it often keeps you stuck inside your own illusion. And there are moments when you do not realize you are placing your whole heart into a version of them that exists only in your imagination. You idealize them by remembering their good moments, those rare instances when they were kind or attentive. And then you use those moments to justify the things that hurt you. You idealize the pain by believing that if you are just a little more patient, if you love a little more, if you try a little harder, everything will change. You do not do this intentionally. You are simply trying to protect what you want. But protecting hope by denying truth is a way of hurting yourself more every day. In Carl Jung's psychology, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. This is like running after a shadow. You see its shape and believe you can catch it, but the more you run, the further it moves. Not because you are slow, but because that shadow does not belong to reality. It is the reflection of light and angle, just like the version of the other person you are holding in your mind. You cannot catch an image that is not real, yet you exhaust yourself, believing the failure is your fault. You wait for the other person to change, as though their transformation would be proof that you are worthy of love. You believe love will make them more caring, more consistent, or more emotionally mature, even when their actions show none of that. You live in the gap between expectation and reality, and that gap grows wider every day, leaving you feeling emptier. You often comfort yourself by thinking that if you are just a little more patient, they will change. If you are softer, they will appreciate you. If you endure their silence for a few more days, they will finally recognize your value. But the truth is, the things you hope for are not based on what they are doing. They are based on what you wish they would become. You look at their potential, not at their reality. You cling to a handful of rare good moments and use those moments to cover up an entire pattern of behavior that exhausts you. You believe in the version of them in your imagination, even though their actions today tell a completely different story. This is not because you are naive. It is because you are loving through memory, the memory of a time when you had to try hard just to stay connected. When you fear losing the connection, you cling to hope, not truth. But the more you cling, the more you lose the ability to see what is right in front of you. Only when you stop running do you realize a very clear truth. You do not love them. You love the version you imagined. This truth helps you see that you have given your heart to someone you wished they could become, not to the person who is actually standing before you. You have loved through imagination, far more than through reality, and that is what hurts you, not the other person. I once heard a story from a friend who quit her job to stay home and take care of her children, believing her sacrifice would be understood and appreciated. But as time passed, everything she did was treated as something expected, not valued. One evening, when her husband said, "You stay home all day and still complain that you are tired," she froze. In that moment, she realized the real pain was not in the sentence itself, but in the fact that she had been waiting for appreciation from someone who never showed it. And that truth sobered her more than 1,000 comforting words. Have you ever been in a moment like that? You sit alone and suddenly realize that what hurts you is not that they are too busy or too distant. It is what you have been waiting for them to do, something they have never shown the capacity to do. You recall all the times you felt disappointed when they did not prioritize you. The times you studied every small detail, hoping to find proof that they cared. The times you believed that if you were just a little better, they would finally see your worth. Be clear-eyed enough to realize that you are trying to hold on to something that was never truly in your hands. You are not hurting because you lost them. You are hurting because you must release a future you invested too much hope in, a future built from expectation, not from what they ever actually offered. What you can do right now is bring everything back to its true shape. Write down, in a few simple lines, how they have really treated you, the things you hoped for but never happened, the moments you felt hurt but dismissed. When you see it on paper, it becomes clearer. Not to blame yourself, but to separate yourself from illusion. Clarity frees you first. When you look at their actions honestly, you will feel yourself becoming lighter in a very real way. You no longer have to defend them every time they are silent or indifferent. You no longer have to gather tiny crumbs of attention just to reassure yourself that they do care. You no longer have to keep hoping that one day they will behave differently, even though they have never given you a single sign of it. The beautiful part is that when you stand in truth, you also see yourself more clearly, not with blame, but with compassion. You see how wholeheartedly you loved. You see how patient you were. You see how sincerely you hoped. And that shows you that you loved beautifully. But not everyone has the capacity to respond to something beautiful. When you stop chasing the illusion, you return to reality. Reality is not always pleasant, but it is unmistakably clear. It gives you peace instead of waiting, truth instead of expectation, and helps you see where your boundaries actually are. You begin asking yourself, what do I truly need? The stronger version of you does not appear when you forget them. It appears when you look directly at the truth, without fear. When you dare to admit that you loved an imagined version, you are no longer trapped in the loop. You see the path ahead more clearly. You know you deserve someone truly present, someone who loves you at the right time and in the right way, not someone you must hope will become that person. Truth may make you sad for a few days, but illusion can make you suffer for many years. When you choose truth, you step out of blind love and into mature love. Love does not change a person's nature. It simply reveals who they truly are through their smallest actions. Understanding this early saves you from holding on to a beautiful expectation that has no reality beneath it, and it protects your peace. This is the moment you stop chasing the shadow. You stand still and face the light. You no longer try to change anyone. You no longer wait for something vague. You return to yourself. And when you do, truth no longer hurts you. It becomes the foundation from which you begin again with clarity and with respect for your own worth. Level 5. What you can do to start changing today. Perhaps the hardest part of this journey is not realizing the problem. Realizing is already difficult, but beginning to change is even harder. When you come face to face with yourself, you may feel confused, unsure where to begin, unsure what the first step should be, and afraid you will fall back into your old patterns. This feeling is very real and very common. Anyone who has ever wanted to change has stood exactly where you are standing now. You are used to reacting through old instincts. Those instincts have protected you for many years, pushing you to act quickly, to avoid fear, or to preserve love by sacrificing yourself. But those instincts were not designed for the future you want. Carl Jung believed, "We are not what happened to us. We are what we choose to become." Your instincts were created to help you survive at a time when you could not choose. So every time you try to change, your body and your unconscious pull you back toward the old road, because the old road feels familiar, safer, and requires less of you. Imagine learning to drive again after a long time away from the wheel. In the beginning, your hands may feel clumsy, your feet unsure, your movements stiff, and your mind constantly reminding you what to do. But as you practice, everything becomes a skill. You no longer need to think so much. You just know how to adjust. Emotional change works the same way. It does not come from one bold moment. It comes from repeating small actions that lead you in the right direction. In everyday life, you can clearly see the conflict between what you know and what you do. You know texting while anxious usually makes everything worse, but you still do it because the fear inside you is too strong. You know the other person is not right for you, but you still give them another chance because you are familiar with the pull of what hurts. You know you need boundaries, but you still accept things that drain you because you do not want to disappoint anyone. This is not a lack of logic. This is the sign that you are living according to an old emotional program. It is only when you recognize that change does not need to be perfect, change only needs to be consistent, that everything becomes easier. One small step, repeated enough times, will create a big difference. You cannot wake up and become a completely new person overnight. But you can wake up and choose one small action that moves you closer to the version of yourself you want to become. When you understand this, you feel less pressure and less fear of failure, because you know every small step is still progress. What you can do starting today does not require you to be stronger or smarter. It simply requires you to slow down and be honest with your emotions. Observe yourself for 5 minutes whenever you feel triggered. In those 5 minutes, you do not need to fix anything. You only need to identify what emotion is rising in your body: anxiety, fear, nervousness, anger, sadness, hope, or emptiness. When you look directly at that emotion, you are breaking your old reflex and opening a new space for a new choice. Once you allow yourself to pause and observe your emotions, the next step is to name the fear behind your anxiety. It might be the fear of losing someone you think you need, or the fear of being left behind, like in your past. It might be the fear of not being good enough to be loved, or the fear of facing loneliness. If you simply whisper in your mind, Ah, this is the fear of abandonment, or this is the fear of not being enough. You are lifting the emotion from the unconscious into a place where you can actually see it. And when an emotion is seen, it no longer controls you the way it used to. You will feel a little calmer, a little clearer, not because the fear disappears, but because you are standing in the position of the adult, observing it, instead of letting it steer you. After naming the fear, you can practice one small boundary. A boundary is how you teach your body and mind that you are the one who gets to choose. Do not text back until your mind is calm. Do not agree to things you do not want. Do not stay silent when you need to be heard. Do not continue a conversation that is hurting you. When you set one small boundary, you are rebuilding your self-respect from the inside out. These small actions become the foundation of big change. You will notice that every time you choose a new action, the fear decreases slightly. Then one day, you realize you are calmer in situations that used to overwhelm you. You reply to messages from clarity, not anxiety. You know what you want in a relationship. You are no longer swept away by old emotional storms. Your stronger self is not the one who can walk away from everything in one day. It is the one who understands where your feelings are coming from. You begin to sense the difference between clinging to a relationship out of fear of emptiness versus entering a relationship because you genuinely want to share a journey. Between holding on so you do not lose them versus staying because you feel peaceful within yourself. Between expecting someone else to fill your void versus caring for your own unmet needs before offering your heart to someone. When you stand in your adult self, you no longer chase people who make you anxious, nor do you run away from genuine connections. You choose relationships because you choose yourself first. You understand that love does not need to be chaotic to be deep. It can grow from clarity, presence, and the ability to stand firmly within yourself. You begin to see that this journey is not about fixing someone else. It is about developing yourself. You become someone capable of loving from maturity, not from fear. You know you deserve peaceful love. You know you can create small changes every day. And you know every step you take leads you out of the old cycle. You do not need to be perfect. You only need to be honest with your own emotions. You will do something you may not have done in many years. You will take your own side. When you take your own side, you no longer fight to grab love. You create love. You no longer repeat old responses. You create new choices. And from that place, you choose the love you truly deserve. Has there been a moment in your life when you realized you deserved a different kind of love? Sometimes just one line of reflection is enough to open a new awareness. Your story can inspire and guide others who are walking the same path. Leave a comment below and join this conversation with us. Level 6. What a stronger version of you looks like. You wake up in the morning just like any other day, still go to work, still talk the way you always do. Everything looks the same. You might not even realize you've changed, because real change doesn't make loud noises. It doesn't turn you into a completely different person overnight, nor does it immediately transform the circumstances around you. But inside, something very small has shifted. A new stillness, a clarity you didn't have before, a sense that you no longer react the way you used to when facing the things that once pulled you into emotional spirals. Real change always happens like that, quietly but steadily, like the surface of a lake calming after a long wind. Have you ever felt something like that? No one needs to tell you that you've grown. You can feel it when an old fear no longer keeps you awake, when someone's silence no longer startles you, when you stand before a familiar choice and realize you're no longer being pulled into your old reflexes. That is change. Not loud, not dazzling, but so deep that you can't go back to the way you lived before. One of the clearest signs that you've changed is when the things that once shook you no longer affect you the same way. Words that used to keep you tossing all night now only make you reflect briefly before you release them. People who once made you anxiously wait no longer make you restless or overly worried. You are not becoming numb. You are simply steadier, calmer, and less easily swept away by the familiar emotional patterns you once couldn't control. This is not emotional loss. It is the peace that comes with inner maturity. Your emotions are sometimes like a strong current. In the past, Whenever feelings surged, you were like someone who didn't know how to swim, easily swept away. A message delayed by a few minutes could drown you in anxiety. A small change in someone's tone could drag you to the bottom of your feelings within seconds. And then one day, you realize you've learned how to balance yourself in that same current. You've learned how to swim in your own emotions. You still encounter the same situations, still stand in front of the same waters, but your body no longer trembles the way it used to. You breathe deeper. You observe more clearly. You let the emotion pass instead of letting it pull you under. That is the sign of growth. It's not that the water became gentler. It's that you became stronger, steadier, and no longer afraid of being submerged like before. You no longer fear losing someone, even if they're important to you. You understand that someone's presence is their choice, not something you must maintain through fear. Setting boundaries becomes normal. Boundaries no longer feel like something that might hurt others. They become a sign of self-respect. You say, "I need more space," with a voice that is soft but firm. You say, "I'm not comfortable with that," without your hands shaking. You also stop idealizing people. You see others exactly as they are. You don't inflate their strengths. You don't blur their flaws. You don't turn them into a solution for your inner voids. This clarity helps you see the real nature of a relationship without being swept into the beautiful story you created in your mind. When you stop idealizing, you see reality, and reality brings peace. The greatest awakening happens when you realize, I don't need anyone to feel whole, but I can choose someone from a place of wholeness. This is not just a beautiful quote. It is the real state of someone who has walked through the deeper layers of themselves. Before, you sought love to fill a void. You were drawn to people whose wounds matched yours. Now, you choose love from fullness. You no longer love from fear, but from your true self. At this moment, a saying of Jung aligns perfectly with the journey you've traveled. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This describes exactly the state you're touching. When you begin living as your true self, instead of a version sculpted by fear, you enter a new level of calm. What you can do now doesn't come from effort, but from choice. Each morning, ask a simple question. What am I choosing today from my essence, not from fear? This question returns you to your center, whenever your emotions try to pull you away. When you face a decision, ask whether you're choosing because you want to, or because you're afraid of losing someone. When you want to send a message just to check on someone, ask whether you're doing it from insecurity or from a real connection. When you feel like stepping back from someone, ask whether it's because they're not right for you or because you fear intimacy. As you observe how you choose, you'll see a change in the smallest actions. Suddenly, you no longer feel the need to prove anything to anyone. You no longer care too much about others' opinions. You stop getting pulled into battles for attention. You step out of emotional games that once exhausted you. The strongest version of you appears when you stand firmly in your place without needing to justify it. In Becoming, Michelle wrote that when she was young, she reacted intensely to small shifts in a lover's attention, easily sad, easily worried, easily scared of losing. But after many years of understanding herself, she said, when you know your worth, you're no longer shaken by things you cannot control. You love with steadiness. Or, like Adele, who shared that she left her marriage not because of a fight or a dramatic event, but because one morning, she realized, I no longer see myself in this relationship. She wasn't angry at her ex-husband, nor devastated as in past breakups. She left because something very quiet inside her had changed. She knew she deserved a life that felt true to her heart. This level of maturity shows up clearly. You become calmer in conflict. You express your needs without tension. You listen without shrinking yourself. You can love someone deeply without abandoning your boundaries. You can care for someone while still choosing what is best for you. You can walk away from a relationship without feeling like you failed. When you reach this layer, love is no longer a battlefield, no longer a race, no longer a formula you must perfect to be loved back. Love becomes a space. In that space, you and the other person can be free, light, and authentic. You do not love from emptiness. You love from fullness. And love that comes from fullness can withstand challenges because it does not depend on external validation. The stronger version of you is not someone who never gets hurt. You still feel, still ache, still have soft days. The stronger version of you is someone who knows how to return inward instead of running outward to find someone to fill the gap. You know how to care for yourself. You know how to protect yourself. You know when to go, when to pause, when to open your heart, and when to let go gently. You'll clearly see that healing doesn't make you invincible. It makes you conscious. And consciousness is the foundation of peace. You are no longer afraid of being loved the wrong way because you know you're worthy of choosing again. You're no longer afraid to love deeply because your love is no longer a wound disguised as emotion. You no longer avoid difficult conversations because you know they lead to truth, and truth always sets you free. This is the moment you realize you have stepped into a stronger version of yourself. A person who is calmer in emotion, clearer in needs, and wiser in choosing who gets to enter your life. Someone who loves not because they fear being alone, but because they genuinely want to walk alongside another. Someone who connects not to fill a void, but because they are already whole. And when you stand in this version of yourself, you understand that a good relationship does not come to save you. It comes so that two people can be themselves and still feel safe and close, closing the journey and opening another door. You have just walked through a 7-layer journey of transformation from the moment you sensed that something was happening inside you, to understanding the cause, facing the real wound, touching the deepest truth, learning how to change step by step, and returning to a more whole version of yourself. Not everyone is brave enough to go inward the way you just did. And even if you may not feel it clearly yet, the change has already begun from the moment you dared to look at yourself. Sometimes inner shifts don't make loud noises. They don't wake you up with a sudden burst of radiance. They simply soften a small corner of your heart, make you chase a little less after what exhausts you, and make you calmer in front of the things that once terrified you. And this very small shift becomes the foundation for all greater transformations that follow. When you understand yourself better, the way you love changes, the way you choose changes, and the way you live becomes clearer. If this journey has touched you at any layer, allow yourself to stay a little longer. There are still many things inside you waiting to be heard. Many quiet voices that need to be recognized. Many dark corners that need to be seen with gentle light. No one can walk this entire path for you, but you do not have to walk it alone. And if you want to continue this journey with me, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next video. In the next one, I will open another deeper layer where you begin to see clearly what truly guides your emotional choices. If this resonates with you, stay. There is still so much within you waiting for your next step.